Alright, so we're going to make a very small little potion bottle very quickly. Right? We're going to use loop cut tool to split the cube in half, selecting the bottom polygon, then Control plus, and then F. What that allows us to do is we've basically bisected the cube and then gotten rid of the bottom junk, and we now have a cube that sits on world 0. Not totally necessary, but it's pretty much the same way I start every cube, you know? I'm then going to scale this up a little bit, right? And what I want to do here for this is I'll sort of talk you through the planning of what I'm going to do before we do it. Basically, I want to make a little potion bottle that has a square body and then a cylindrical sort of top, but that crucially has some sort of a smooth transition between the two states, right? Sorry, between the two topologies. So the way that I'm going to do that is I am going to, I guess, do some math, right? The basic idea here is that if we have these 4 edges and we bevel them, sorry, let me apply my scale, and we bevel them, then what we ideally want is a cylinder that ends up with this number of edges, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? But this isn't really enough bevels to make this like work, so I'm going to do a little bit more, right? I'm going to do a big bevel, and then we'll do something like this, right? Now I'm going to be a loser, and I'm going to count these one by one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? So we split 4 edges of the cube into 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 4 times 4, 16. So what that means is that in order to join these topologies like in a way that doesn't like look really bad, we need a cylinder on the top that has 16 sides. Right? I might actually increase that a little bit more because of this like central bit here. Because if we sort of think about what I just said, and I grab these loops and I go bridge edge loops, not super great. Ideally what we want is sort of these 4 to line up with those with 4 that are correspond there. So I'll show you another example, right? If I actually add a cube and scale this to be sort of the bottle neck, right? Let me get rid of that on the bottom. If I bevel this by 16, we now sort of see the natural structure that we kind of want to arise here. So I'm going to bevel that maybe sort of to about there, right? And then we're going to merge this across. We now have a large flat face to merge to. Another flat face here. And then we're going to merge these across like this. Okay. I'm just going to run a symmetrize command real quick, making sure that I'm flipping from negative x to positive x, because negative x is this side, and I did all the work on this side, and it's going to flip it over. Now what I want to do is I want to kind of continue massaging this into the circle, right? Because I've sort of said, well, I want a perfect circle up the top, all right? So I'm actually going to add a circle, 16 edges, 16 verts. Extrude that up, and now I'm going to do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to bridge these. See how the numbers are different? Sorry, the triangulation's like all weird and different. It's because the number of the bottom and the number of the top are not the same. I thought this was 16. I made a mistake, so I'm going to count. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it should be 18. Pretty sure if I select this loop and I go up here to statistics, edges 18, right? Edges 16. So what we actually want, and I'll put my cursor here, is we want an 18-sided cylinder. Okay. Now I can bridge. That's going to bridge across. So what I've done is I've made, pretty much in the worst way you could do this, a series of shapes that sort of are like largely different in form, but we've kept all of the edges sort of like flowing together like this, right? What I'm now going to do is, through a series of slides, smooth this shape out. Because think about it, if I slide this edge down to here, it's going to kind of like naturally smooth that out, right? I can add a loop in the middle and shrink it in. Oh, but I might not want to shrink it on the y-axis. I might only want to shrink it on the x-axis and then a touch on the y-axis, and then counteract that same sort of shrinkage here. And this is going to just be like a little bit artistic, right? Notice that I made an asymmetric edit here, right? I was going to symmetrize it, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to turn on these buttons up here. This lets us keep, like we're doing symmetric stuff live, I guess you could say. X, Y, and not Z. The reason I haven't done a mirror modifier is because I actually don't want to put an edge loop here like this. Right? The reason I have it on this side is because it lines up exactly with this cylinder line. So I actually don't want to do it here, because that'll make my cylinder like kind of flat and weird on this side, and I kind of want to keep it like just continuing around. So by turning on these, I get symmetric commands like without actually needing the symmetry modifier. And the idea now is to just sort of massage the square shape into the circle shape in a way that just kind of feels natural. Right? If I say shade auto smooth, it's basically just going to pick the edges that are sort of closest to 60, I think, 30 degrees. It's going to make those ones hard, and then it's going to smooth this out. And because we can see that the smoothing of this is actually quite gradual across this, that's a very good indicator that our edge flow is actually very strong, right? Now, truthfully, for games, I could have modeled this in about 4 seconds if I didn't care about the topology, and it actually would have been completely fine, because this is going to be in the low poly workflow to the high poly workflow, and we're going to end up baking across, and the only thing we care there is about the true surface shading. We actually don't really care about the topology, but I wanted to sort of show that, like, in order to merge one like kind of silly shape, like one very disproportionate shape to another, you sort of have to think about the number of edges that are going to be around both, and then that gives you a natural sort of fluid like merging thing, merging sort of like flow, right? And because we don't have n-gons, and we did actually, and like we don't have triangles, we didn't take the shortcuts, we actually like care about our topology, that allows us to just, you know, freely do some extra stuff, right? Like we can get bevels here for free. We can run edge loops pretty much wherever we want them, right? So I'm just going to finish this up real quick. And I'm just taking time to not use too many polygons, but just enough so that that neck tapers in a smooth way, like that, right? Cool. I'm going to bevel this large bottom part, and you'll notice how I was just talking about n-gons before. The part that we really care about the edge flow, this upper part, isn't like really relevant down here, right? So I can bevel this, get rid of those, and then maybe run a symmetrize now along the negative x to positive x. Cool. Now we want to clean up this n-gon, so I'm just going to divide that, divide that, divide that. Boom, right? Easy money. Basically, because this is a cube, you know, cubes freely subdivide into other squares, you're going to just see a bunch of squares show up everywhere sort of naturally. So we don't really have to think that hard about topology for a prop like this. Inset this, pop this down, and then we're going to add 2 bevels here, just to smooth this out a little bit, right? Oh, we can be greedy. It's 2025, we've got supercomputers. Cool. I can see that when I beveled that as well, my shading changed, so I'm actually going to run an edge loop here just to flatten that shading out a little bit and just add some support, because I actually want this to be sort of flat shaded, I guess you could say. This shading here looks weird because of our smooth modifier, but now that I've added geometry here to like force the shading, I've added enough geometry, such that shading can naturally occur across this object. I don't really need this here anymore, because I've given it the geometry that it needs to have nice smoothing across that edge. Right? And I could probably tend to give it a little bit more as well. Drag that edge up a bit just so that and do you see how I'm sort of checking my low poly so I can sort of see the shading? As we look down here, shading gets bendy, really bendy down here. So I'm actually going to add more geometry down here to allow that to sort of get smoothed out. Same thing here. You know, we often talk about n-gons being dreadful, and they can be for sure, right? You can see here that this triangulation is ambiguous and it's kind of gone off here, and we can see this error. That's not actually here because of the n-gon. It's here because the polygon in general shares vertices with a non-planar edge. If I triangulate these, we're still going to get those same shading errors. It's just going to change where it is, but it's the exact same error. It doesn't matter if it's the n-gon or not. So what we actually need here is to inset all of this. But before doing that, I'll run a symmetrize again, just to flip this data over, right? Cool. We can now inset that, and now we control the smoothing on the bottom, right? So looking pretty good. We don't always have to control all the smoothing just through edge loops. Like, we can mix and match. If I add an auto smooth now, it's going to like flatten that edge out and this one. So what I would actually want to do is say, well, I pretty much only want to catch this edge. So I want my angle to be quite high, but not quite, you know, over 90, but pretty close to it. That's basically allowed just that edge to be like hardened, all right? Cool. So that's our bottle. I'm now going to give it some sort of a cork, right? And this is like going to take 2 seconds. Scale this in, put this up here, shrink that in to sort of about there, and then maybe we add a little bit of stylization by adding some loops, and then we start changing the silhouette just a touch. That gives us just a little bit of interesting like form to it, right? And then I'm going to grab the top and I'm going to bevel that in, but I'm going to make this bevel quite tight, and then I'm going to run an inset here because I actually want to sort of retain the shading there, get rid of this smoothing thing, and then I'm going to get rid of this huge cap on the bottom because you can see it's actually contributing to the shading here, and I don't want that. So get rid of that. And now we have a very simple cork for our bottle. In general, the player's not going to see any of these polygons, so we may as well lift that up to say like here, because when we eventually get around to texturing, maybe we might end up deciding to use those polygons, and we'll just be dedicating texture space to those polygons. That's largely a waste, right? If you can't see it, then sort of get rid of it in general. All right, so there we go. That's a very simple like vial, you know, concoction potion of some kind, but it sort of demonstrates the point that we can turn like squares into like circles by way of just ensuring their edge loops are similar. Now, I haven't done the greatest job of like, you know, scaling these and whatnot either, because like this edge is a bit gross. Like, do you see how this sort of naturally curves in and then it kind of bumps around and then curves back? You really don't. You don't want like that sort of shape. You kind of want these to be, in general, very flowy, I guess, in their overall silhouette change. But truthfully, as long as the shading looks good, that's mostly what we're after at the moment. Okay? So there we go. Simple little vial, but we're going to clean up the scales actually before I finish up, right? So this vial is like 4.2 meters tall. We don't want that, right? So I'm going to get rid of all this. I'm going to use median point, switch my pivot point to 3D cursor. With Shift C, I'm going to make sure the 3D cursor is at world 0, and then I'm then going to grab everything and just scale it all the way down. Right? How big should this vial be? Let's say like 15 centimeters, I guess. So I'm going to keep scaling this down until it gets to about 15 centimeters. So that's a pretty big vial, but something like that. Cool. And then we need to make sure we apply this, right? Apply rotation and scale. Apply rotation and scale. The bottle, I have its origin point at world 0, but I'm actually going to leave this little like cork bottle. It can have its origin up here. It's not like the end of the world. But there we go. Simple little, vial bottle prop thing of some description, right?